Thanks for listening to Fluff and Crunch, where we talk about system, setting, and story in tabletop RPGs and share our experience to hopefully help you have your best game. Greetings.
Hello, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm on the mend.
All right.
My boss reminded me that this is the second time this year. I forget when the other one was. I got sick over a holiday. Like we had one of those 1 days off from work things, and I got sick. So, such is life.
Bugs happen.
They do. So, you ran a session of Traveler. So let's talk about your Traveler session. Let's talk about that. I'm really curious. You ran High and Dry. So let's talk about this, and let's talk about how it relates back to what we talked about in the last episode, how that was helpful or not, or whatever. Blind spots.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did run High and Dry. It was a ton of fun. We actually got about halfway through. It's funny. We actually hit the point where the game actually is like, this is a pretty good halfway point for the game. So they are just figured out that they need to go to the volcano. So we've hit that point where they have done all the prep work, and the next session is figuring out getting up the volcano. And they've asked nothing so far about how they're going to do it. So I'm assuming as of right now that they're planning on climbing the mountain, and we'll go from there and see if they have anything. But they were all smart enough to find breather masks.
Okay, good.
So that might be a little more interesting than normal.
So how did they, now, first off, how long was your session? How long did you folks sit down to play?
So we played right around 3 hours.
Okay. So how did you, like, how much, call it, and I use this term loosely, like one-to-one time, the idea that the time passing at the table is roughly the same as the time passing in game versus what I usually refer to as like narrative time or hand wave time, where you describe through like, yeah, that was that day or that was that week or whatever. How did you balance between those two to cue up the story and then get them to Walston? Because it's pretty much like before the opening credits type activity before you get to Walston.
So how I did it was I did it in sections, kind of like we would do scenes with 2D20, where basically we had a true like played scene between the players and Anders Kasseri at the high port to get the intro. And then we did a quick like, okay, now we're going to like kind of speed time up, figure out what gear are you taking, the ship you're going on, all that kind of stuff, some background description. And then I did a quick like, okay, now you're on this ship traveling to Walston. Do you have any questions about like the world you want to learn about? Is there anything you want to ask this crew who are clearly travelers that have been doing this for a little while? And then I did kind of a scene there where they played poker with the crew. So they got to do that for a little bit to get to know some of the crew members and lose some credits in the playing of that game. And then we spent a little time on the world in between 567 908 there, where they got to kind of meet some characters and stuff. And I kind of teased, I'm kind of already planning on how to take them into the next adventure after this. And I did a slight teasing of Safari World. So yeah, so we'll see how they kind of already are planning on what to do when they get there the next time. And then it was more just kind of like narrative time skip, the second jump to get to Walston. And then when we got to Walston itself, it was like like gameplay of going through customs really quickly, and then gameplay of figuring out, okay, who do we need to talk to get the ship? And then it was very like quick, like, okay, we need to shop for these things really quickly. We need to travel between the towns to do this stuff. And then they had a very short narrative with the council member on Walston of here's where the ship's located, here's the contract deal, and then they're ready to go. And I was like, is there anything else that you want to cover before next session? And they were like, no, I think we have everything we need. And so next session is going to be heading towards the mountain.
Were there any things that happened that you like it felt like it worked out the way you anticipated that your group would work through that portion of the adventure? And were there any that it was like, oh, crumb, I have to dance. I have to, I've got to bob and, shoot and move because they're coming at me from left field.
So so most of it went pretty much exactly how I planned based on things that I've heard you talk about with High and Dry through what I saw with Seth's YouTube channel and his description of High and Dry, and then kind of from my own, just like reading through and understanding my players. It all worked out pretty much the way I expected. There were two things that were a little difficult for me. One of them was while they were on the planet, one of the like planet in between Walston and the High Port, they were talking to the bartender that's on the planet. And I had planned out like a name and whatever because they all always want to go to bartenders. It's adventurers and a party. And they were having that conversation. And one of the characters, I forgot that we had agreed to allowing him to do something if he was addled enough by either alcohol or drugs. And that kind of threw me off because I forgot about the deal that I had made with him before the campaign, and then kind of had to like play that into the moment. And it ended up working out really well. Everyone had a good laugh about it. It was a lot of fun, but it also might have some gameplay stuff that it will come in later on, which will be useful and kind of fun to do with him. And then the other one was my Vargr party member was getting
I'm really
annoyed.
curious about that because, and if you are not, you're watching, you're listening, you're not familiar with you're not familiar with Traveler. What's wrong with you? No, if you're not familiar with Traveler, there's a link in this episode's notes to a free starter set, like some downloadable starter materials that Mongoose has put out. But the Vargr are one of the playable species. They're elevated dogs. They were Terran dogs they're more like wolf-like. Or fox-like, kind of like that, somewhere in that neighborhood. But they were elevated by some, ancient, super high-tech race. No one knows who they are, the ancients. And the Vargr, by the way, are very proud of the fact that they were chosen to be elevated. But they live in like kind of packs, and they're kind of dog-like in their behavior. But on the planet of Walston, they're second-class citizens. So yeah, how did that play out?
So it also, I think, really helpful background. Basically, this player, when he created this Traveler, went through the whole process and basically turned him into a 12-year veteran police officer. Oh, yeah. So someone who's very used to authority and used to being in charge of the situation. And I could tell that, one, he's my most experienced player. When we were talking about the experienced versus unexperienced players, he's the one that I would consider the most experienced out of the entire party in every sense. Was doing a very good job of keeping himself separate from the character, but I could tell that the character was getting very like annoyed with this situation because he's used to being the one that people talk to, and he's in charge and he's important, and no one would really look him in the eye. And then it got to this very last like meeting with this high level like government official on Walston, and he literally at one point was like, look me in the eye at this dude, and the dude like kind of like turned, and I said, I'm like, he looks at you very quizzically, like, why are you acting this way? And he actually like threatened in character the person, and I'm like, okay, so I'm going to need you to roll an intimidation roll for what you're saying.
Sure.
And he's like, well, I'm not trying to intimidate him.
Sorry.
And everyone at the table is like, what you're doing right now is, we're all GMs. Like, what you're doing would require a role in any game any of us run. So you cannot weasel your way out of just saying, well, I'm just saying this as a point of fact. And he's like, well, then I don't say that because I don't want to do an intimidation roll on this character. That's not really what I'm going for. And we're like,
I don't want to fail miserably and fall on my snout in front of this government official. Yeah, but that's one of those moments in a game like Traveler where you lean into, hey, your actions have consequences. It's not you in the fantasy tavern and you decide to just like kick the dwarf in the face and there are no repercussions at all.
Well, and that was one of the things that was most fun for me in this situation as a GM. One of the things that I had been worried about was having so many experienced players. But for me, it was like, or experienced GMs, it was really simple because I was just like, give me a roll. And he was like, I don't want to roll. And then everyone else at the table was immediate like, no, that's a roll.
That
like
calls
you
for a
can't try to get out of that.
Yeah.
Exactly. So everyone just kind of backed up the decision.
I've heard a good description. I've read this in a number of newer games. It talks about like the only time you should roll is when failure matters. And I'm paraphrasing like a couple of different takes on this. When the consequences of failure matter, or there's serious time pressure, or there is danger involved. You know, if it doesn't meet at least one of those, you probably shouldn't roll. Just work through it or assume that the character succeeds. Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool.
Well, and it was one of those situations where because of that, and I also kind of had that in the back of my head too, like, do I have him roll for this? But in the actual like written adventure, it says that this guy is willing to just say, I won't help you and I'll wait for the next ship to come along and do this for me. So for me, I'm like, if you're going to try to intimidate this guy, he's actively willing in the rules of the game to just wait for the next group. So if you're going to intimidate him into what you're saying, you better really like be putting something behind this.
Yeah.
And it worked out great because all the other players were like, absolutely not. Like, if you want to roll, go for it. But other than that, absolutely not. You have to follow what the GM says. That's how this goes. And it all worked out. They basically self-policed, which was great for me.
Yeah, that really, okay, that's terrific. I'm really glad to hear that, because if you've got enough people at the table who recognize or feel they feel the vibe, they feel the right, like they feel like, okay, this is what this game is about. You know, we're actually not murder hobos. Because we're not murder hobos, our behavior, it really has to be different. Okay. And then they self-police, and you end up leading into, you end up producing results through character actions and interactions that actually work with the game. That's great. That's great. How about handling what kinds of roles did you do or did you ask for, and how is handling the mechanics? Do you feel like your preparation for that was adequate?
I think I got really lucky that a lot of the stuff in the beginning of this doesn't require very like high rolls or very many rolls. So when I went into it, I'd actually built one check-in myself that I knew was going to be the very first thing that they were involved with, just to see kind of how it would play out. And it ended up working out great. I added some stuff onto the middle part of the adventure just so there was something in the middle going on, that they weren't just stopping at this middle planet for no reason. And it worked out great because one of the characters rolled like not enough for an effect to take place, but enough for it to be like, okay, he clearly did this. It makes it very obvious he can do this. And it helped me to realize, okay, this is the way the system wants you to play this and to make these kind of decisions. So they ended up only rolling 2 more times the rest of that session, because I knew there wasn't going to be a lot of necessary rolls. People are actively looking for them to help. So it makes it really easy for them to just kind of be like, we're here, we're happy to help. And then people let them do what they want. But they did do 2 more rolls, which helped a lot. But then I played another session of Traveler just yesterday that's outside of High and Dry.
And this is just
and there
one
were all
player, right?
Yes, this is just with one player. But it had significantly more rolls because of kind of, he picked the most difficult path to follow, not as in like the bad path, but the one with the most like difficult things to do where you'd have to roll for it. And it ended up working out really well. His rolls ended up working perfect. I like that the average for Traveler is not like the average for the dice, that an average difficulty test is a difficulty 8, not a difficulty 6. So it does kind of make that a little bit more interesting with the abilities that the Travelers have. It's helping to explain to the players why not being trained in something really means you probably shouldn't be trying that unless you absolutely have to. And I think that's been shown really well, and it's worked out really well for them. But I feel pretty confident with the system at this point, with the adjudicating of things. And there was one point in the game where I was with this one player where he rolled, and I'm like, he's one off of what he needs, and if he doesn't do this, it could end up really, really badly for the story. So I was kind of like, it works out. Like, you found it. You did the
Just
thing you were
remembered
supposed to.
yeah. You know,
Yeah. So
if you're not, and you're listening, you're watching, you're not familiar with the Traveler mechanic, it is 2d6 added. You roll 2d6, you add them together, and then you add skill ratings are anywhere from like, well, 0, they can be 0, up to like 4 or 5, which is extraordinarily rare. Like if you have a skill level of 2, you are a competent professional. There are also stat bonuses. So like if you're flying a ship, you're going to use piloting. That's the skill. And then you'd probably use, why am I brain cramping? Is it reaction? Is it agility? What's the
dexterity?
Dexterity. There you go. So let's say you have a high dexterity, which then gives you a bonus of say 1, and you have piloting of 2. You would roll 2d6 and add 3, and you try to meet or beat a difficulty number. And the difficulty numbers are broken down by like routine, average, challenging, whatever, different levels, and you got to meet or beat. There's an optional rule. I haven't used it, but I think it's interesting. That's in the Traveler Companion about it's an optional dice roll or skill resolution mechanic, and it's meant to be used outside of combat, where the number of points that a traveler has in a given skill is the number of automatic successes, unless GM Fiat says like, yeah, this is way too difficult. Like you're trying to, fly through a supernova or something, whatever. You're trying to dodge through the asteroids. Han Solo could not use this in Empire Strikes Back in the chase through the asteroid field. But doing like, call it like routine challenges, things that are that the outcome is in question. There is a time suspense. It is potentially a dangerous situation, but it's not combat and it's not like ridiculously difficult. You're like, well, I have 2 points in piloting, so I'm just going to burn one of those points and you don't use up the point. It's just you would have 2 automatic successes with no chance for rolling effect. That's in the Traveler Companion. So, okay, that's cool. By the way, what's the, it sounds to me like this High and Dry campaign is starting off as a quintessential Traveler campaign, which is excellent. What's the frame of the other one? What's the story foundation for
so the story foundation
character?
is when he was going through, it's actually not one character. He's like, I want to play an entire party myself. So he's actually playing 4 characters at once, which, if it weren't him, I probably wouldn't let someone do this, but he's been GMing for me for 3 years, playing every NPC that my character interacts with.
So he's capable story-wise of juggling.
Correct.
That's cool.
But what ended up happening is throughout character creation, we kind of did it the same way that we did the other campaign where you build characters at the same time. Yeah. And he ended up with this character that actually rolled really well. And she was a low-level admiral in the Navy.
Okay.
And all of the other characters at some point in their career were involved with the Navy.
Okay.
So basically, she has been given a mission to do by the Navy now that she's retired, and she's put together all of these other kind of misfit toys to help her, but none of them know her mission. They're just kind of with her like, this is a great job, they're going to pay really well, she knows what she's doing, we all know her. And she's going through and she's like, okay, I have this mission from the Navy, and the person who gave it to her was like, with the task, like, hey, if you do a really good job with this, there might be something like a title in it for you.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's so travel. You know what's cool about that is you, in effect, it sounds like you, and I know who this person is. You and this individual, are using the Traveler rules and setting to help you to tell a cool story or write a cool story. That's what that sounds like. That's really cool. Actually, that's a really good idea. Like if you have that kind of a player and you have that kind of a relationship with the person, you could totally do that. So, okay. All right. So you feel confident about dice mechanics. You haven't had any combat. Okay.
I did in his game, and
Okay.
it worked out really well actually because all of the characters were military trained. It ended up what I thought was going to be a relatively difficult combat ended up turning into a like SEAL Team 6
Well, it's
situation.
also really easy to make sure that the player characters coordinate when they're all in your head. That
Correct.
makes life easier for the yeah. Um,
But I did make it difficult by giving them only one weapon at the start. So in order to get more weapons, they had to like take down the bad guys
that's
to get the weapons to make it, which made it more challenging than what it could have been if that wasn't
if
the
they didn't,
case.
yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things, and this is back to the high and dry game. One of the things that stands out to me always, and a friend of mine has pointed this out very keenly about Traveler, is that combat can be really deadly.
Mm-hmm.
Combat can be, it can be really deadly, and it's not to be entered into lightly. And so you should stack the deck in your favor. Or, for example, like I doubt that because no one's piloting a ship right now. You've just
Mm-hmm.
been hand waving the like start astrogation and jump drive garbage and stuff like that. One of the
Correct.
things, and I don't know if you remember this, but it's on the same page or like a page or two from the table about effect in the rules is that you can adjust the time scale of a task.
Mm-hmm.
So so if you like a given task will have a given amount of time by default. Is it rounds, is it minutes, is it hours, tens of minutes, whatever. And so if you deliberately reduce the amount, you take longer, you roll at a lower difficulty. If you try to speed up something, it becomes more difficult. So doing things like when you're leaving the system to go out to the jump point at 100 diameters, if you can take your time, because that just makes the jump roll and the astrogation, it just makes those easier because there's that task chain mechanic. So if you're thinking about anything really that's going to be challenging or potentially dangerous, or the outcome could really like cause problems, it is in the player character's best interest that their players plan, scheme, organize, and array their their variables to make things as advantageous as possible. And Traveler doesn't give you the option of just looking at your character sheet and being, I do that class power and I win. You actually have
Mm-hmm.
to think through it.
And that's what I'm looking forward to. There, I have set it up that there can be combat in the
Okay.
next session of the high and dry. You know where I'm talking about, where they reach the top of the mountain,
Okay.
and it's possible for that to happen depending on how they play it.
When are you
But
going to run
we'll
this
see.
session?
This session is going to take place in 2 weeks on
Okay.
Friday.
Okay.
So
Because this episode will drop next week. It'll drop on Thursday of next week. So we can't say
well,
anything.
yeah. So I
I
will
just
just
tell
say
people to
there.
ignore them.
Yeah, there is combat in the next session. They'll see how that works. But now, actually, with my session with my one player who's also in the other campaign, he now recognizes how deadly combat
Yeah.
is because one of his characters managed to kill one of the bad guys in a single round
Yep.
just because he got a really good damage roll with his dice.
Yep.
He was like, "Oh, this is a gun. This is
Uh-huh.
not like a sword from
Uh-huh.
D&D. This is it will kill you in
Oh
one
yeah.
hit." And I'm like, "Yeah, and these are pretty like standard people that you're fighting." And he
Yep.
goes, "That means they're probably close to my like
Yep.
abilities."
Well, and how?
Oh
Okay.
no.
Real quick. So for those who have not played Traveler, you have
Mm-hmm.
6 stats.
Correct.
And how does damage work?
Yeah, so damage works that once you take all of your negative modifiers, so if they're wearing armor or whatever else,
Right.
and you hit them, you then roll damage. And with that damage, it is first applied to the character's endurance stat,
Mm-hmm.
and then it is applied to one of their other physical stats. And if one of those hit 0, they're considered incapacitated. And then if the other one hit 0, they're considered dead.
Right.
So he managed to basically, the guy had been injured a little bit before, and then in one shot just killed him. And he goes, "Oh," and a not so lethal hit, and then just a normal gunshot. This guy went down and was
Yeah.
toast.
So if you have a weapon that does 4 die 6 damage, and you
Mm-hmm.
have effect, and effect is any amount that you, let's say the difficulty was 8 and you rolled a total of an 11, you generate 3 effect. In combat, that automatically goes to that automatically goes to extra damage. So and an average character is going to have between those three stats maybe what 23, 24, 25 points.
I would say the guys that he was fighting had 18. So they were like literally the bare minimum for average, just because I wanted to see how it worked. And
they get dead quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so then the difference is when you kit up and you armor up and you get ready, you have cover, you have armor, you all those kinds of things. You stack the deck in your favor, but if the damage gets through, you're still in trouble. Yeah, you can get whacked in one shot. You do not enter combat lightly.
Well, and that's where they bought some like decent weapons. They had a decent amount of money when they started the campaign in High and Dry, and they didn't have access to them at first, and they were kind of terrified, like, oh, are we going to have this? And then they don't have all of them. So there's some really expensive weapons that they're like, man, this would be really nice to have. And I'm like, sorry, you don't have it right now. You're going to have to figure it out without those. So I've kind of teased, like, these are really good. There's a reason that they're not allowed here. But I think the next session we play, because this other player has gone through combat, he's going to be like, oh, I really wish we had those really good weapons.
Well, and also for just like rules adjudication and a respect for what the mechanics can do to blow your character away. Or on the other end of it, they have to think like, okay, so if they do get in a fight, not every fight is binary. In other words, we're either fighting or we're killing you. Like,
right.
Maybe you just chase them away. Maybe you smack a couple. Maybe you decide to not use lethal force because it's just not warranted. That's something that I think is lost in the vast majority of games. Like every fight is a fight to the death. So okay, all right. Now in this, it sounds to me like because of the progress you made, you will likely finish the scenario in the next session, because there's not enough for 2 more sessions out of it.
Correct.
Which sounds to me like, yeah, you've got the trip to the volcano, you've got the work on the discovery of and the work on the ship, and then you have the big final action scene thing, which we will not mention because we don't want anyone to listen. Just tell your players not to listen until Saturday. That will probably be, because of the different ship roles, that I recommend you go back and read those or listen to Seth's thing again and make for yourself some reference sheets, and maybe trim down the types of roles. Really, they've got to get the ship fixed enough to fly, and then it's piloting, really. Mm-hmm. And then them just making the decisions of where they go and who they try to, save or who they leave to the volcano.
There is one thing I'm taking from Seth's, that I've changed out some of the pilot roles for a different type of role that I think will really work out beneficially, because we have a player that can use that, and he's going to be the least useful, quote unquote,
that's smart.
For the actual like in orbit like piloting. So he'll have something to do while everyone else is kind of doing their roles. I'm going to be able to be like, and you give me this role, and you give me this role, and you give me this role. That way everybody's doing something at the same time.
And that's smart, because, you on the one hand, I don't think you want to make sure everyone's able to be involved. And unless a player is so obtuse, or they've made a character that is just like, I have no idea how this character would fit in this moment. I was about to joke and say, like, if they showed up with a bard, and then I thought, but wait, you could put the bard on the surface and like, marshal people and get them moving in a direction and inspire them to keep going and whatever. So I guess there is a use for a bard, but yeah, you finding ways to get everyone involved and have everyone be able to contribute is smart.
And I want it to be an action sequence. Like, I want them to feel very, because the more I'm having them do things individually, at least in my mind, when I've been a player, when a GM can look at a group of 3 or 4 players and say, like, and you're each doing this individual thing at the same time, it really stresses the immediacy of what's going on, that it can't be something that we're lollygagging and one person is doing everything at the same, like they're all doing different things, because you have so much time to do this and everyone has to be moving their hands or you're in trouble.
How do you handle, you personally, or how do you plan to manage that at the table? Because, and what I'm thinking about is, here is this action scene. This is an action scene involving a ship that they're flying around in the atmosphere, and there is a big dangerous thing happening that they have to deal with. And because they have the ship, they have the opportunity to be big damn heroes if they play their cards right. I personally, in a scene like that, I mean, you obviously aren't going to, like, you know, blow fire at them at the table or things like that, stress up your players too much. But I do think a bit of pressure on the players helps to drive home what the characters are experiencing. What do you think about that, and how do you see yourself approaching that part of it?
Yeah,
The
so
scene?
the all of these players know enough about this from talking about it and different things that I think they'll understand the pressure that's going on in this situation. So what I'm going to try to do is everything I've heard about this last part of High and Dry is that it can either be run really well and be very fast paced or be very slow and get kind of boring. So I'm going to do my best to try to make sure it's moving at a fast pace. And the way that I'm doing this is I'm basically creating for myself a like, here are a list of the roles they need to do. And I'm going to have it kind of like laid out with like check boxes of like, yes, they
Great
did it.
idea.
No, they didn't. And that way, when I tell them like, you give me this role and you give me this role and you give me this role, you give me this role, I can then check, whatever they need. And then there will be like a quick, like, and because of what you've done, here's what happens. And then they can respond and say like, okay, now that we know that that's what we want to do, we want to try to like, that's what happened. This is what we want to do now, and try to keep the pace going very quickly through
That's really
that
smart.
action.
That's really smart to have a reference like that for you.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I'll suggest is, as you move around the table, in initiative order or whatever order makes sense. As you move around the table, say, okay, what are you gonna do? And then if someone starts to dawdle, because there's always those players, and we all do this at some point or another. I want to do the right thing, and so you want to plan it to death, and then what that does is it slows the action down, which is the
Mm-hmm.
enemy of the tension that can make the session, that moment, feel really cool. So what I'll do is I say, okay, we're all gonna, it's almost like you're playing chess and you hit the little timer. There's only just so much time, but what I will do sometimes is I'll say, okay, what do you do? And then I'll say, you're up next. So like, okay, Slim Bob, you're next. Okay, Judy Jew, you're on deck. So that the person who's coming next in initiative, yeah, they probably remember, but you remind them when the person who's going before them goes to be ready. And then as they do their thing, if they start to dawdle, you prompt them once and you prompt them again. Say, okay, what are you going to do? The ship is shaking. The volcanic cloud is, reaching, 30,000 feet in the sky. What are you going to do? And if they're not, as people catching what you're throwing, like, okay, I need to make a damn decision, I literally will hold up my hand, which I'm not going to do because my camera will zero in on my nose, and I'll say, okay, I'm going to count down to 0. And when that's done, we're going to move to the next person. You will not have taken an action. And I will just count down my fingers slow, like 1, 2, like 5, 6 seconds. And virtually every single time, I don't know if I've ever skipped someone, but I think it's okay to put the pressure directly on the player so that they feel a bit of what their character would feel. And then it keeps the motion going. And if the person who's on deck, the person who's coming up next, has been reminded, they know. And then you say, okay, Sudi Sue, you're going right. Okay, whatever. Jacob, you're on deck. You're next.
Yep, that sounds actually exactly. Yeah,
I don't know
that's what
where
I need.
I don't know where I got that, but there was someone I played with who would do that, who would say like, okay, Steve, all right, Steve's up next. Dave, you're on deck. Just
Okay.
in other words, just like be ready because you're coming next. And if an NPC or I take some action between the players, I don't tell them that. Obviously they'll catch it
Okay.
after a while.
Yeah.
But all they know is which player is going right now and which player is coming next, and I find that helpful.
All right. Yeah, that's going to be super. Actually, that's going to be even more helpful with the next thing I have in my solo game that will be before the next main session, but that'll be great for both. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen all different kinds of ways of people managing communication of initiative order but it's not just, I think it's not just knowing, it's being reminded. And if it is a tense moment, if it's not a navel gazing kind of scene, you want to put some pressure on the players to be able to get that out of there. Okay. Well, that's really cool. I'm excited for you, and I'm looking forward to hearing what happens with that. This other one I want to talk about too. We don't have enough time to do that today, but we will, because managing a one-on-one, like a one-player, one GM, is that provides some terrific, unique opportunities, but it can also be a real challenge.
Correct.
So, okay. Anything else? Is there anything else on your mind about this as you head into session 2 of that, and at some point session 2 of this other one?
Yeah, I definitely want to. So I think what I'm going to do with the big group, the 4 players, I think we're going to want to talk about transitioning from pre-made adventures to a more sandbox option, because I have a way to kind of like connect these adventures together. I know that I'm going to do the what I'm planning for the one after High and Dry. Like that's going to be
World?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so we'll
works.
we'll do that one. But after that, there's a pretty big chance that they just sandbox. So having that kind of plan of what to do after that would be really great.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's that. What I did was, I ran High and Dry, I ran Safari World, and then I made up another one of my own to bring them back, to take them actually to the next subsector over, and that's when I dumped the 5th Frontier War on them, and there was an adventure for that. So that had been my plan, and there were things I would have changed going back, but yeah, the transition from using the pre-made stuff to get things going to moving into your sandbox, actually that'd be a good thing to talk about. Like, what kinds of things traveler wise do you want to nail down before you move into that where it's more open and it's on them, because there's so much that they can do that will inform and help you plan things, but you can't completely shoot from the hip.
Right. And that's what I just need the most, because I've never done personally a sandbox thing, because I haven't had the opportunity. So just anything with that would be super helpful.
Excellent. Okay, so I will think about that, and that is what we can talk about next time. And you folks who are listening or watching, let us know what you think. Obviously, let us know what you think about the transition to a full traveler sandbox or a sandbox in general. Do all the like, subscribe stuff, blah, 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 buy the t-shirts, subscribe to the stuff. And we will we'll see you in a week.
Sounds great.
Thank you as always for listening to Fluff and Crunch. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, all through the links in the show notes.